Welcome to The Wonder, exploring perspectives, rituals, and observances of modern, naturalistic, earth-revering, pagan religious paths. Here are your hosts, Yucca and Mark.
Welcome back to The Wonder, Science-Based Paganism. I'm one of your hosts, Yucca.
And I'm Mark.
And today we thought that we'd come back to some of the practical. We've been talking a lot about philosophical ideas and things like that, and we thought, let's do something that is really more kind of hands-on. And it's been a long time since we've talked about creating sacred space.
Right. And that it's kind of the precursor to everything that we do in a ritual context, right? Is to set the table emotionally and psychologically for us to do the work of a ritual. So we thought that we'd come back to that and talk about it some more because it's kind of an elusive concept until you experience it, and then you know what it feels like, and it's easier to do the things that are needed in order to experience it again.
Right. Yeah, it is really all about your experience of it.
Hmm.
And your experience of it's probably going to be pretty different than somebody else's. I mean, there are some things that are fairly universal to us as a species, but a lot of the associations, the things you're going to be working with will be very personal.
Right. When we talk about some of the things that are universal to us as a species, some of the things that contribute to that feeling of a sacred space are low light conditions, which
Hmm.
tend to lead us to want to speak in hushed whispers, which is probably a remnant of our desire not to be eaten in the dark.
Yes.
A flickering light like candlelight or firelight, light.
Rhyth, go on.
Oh, go
I
ahead.
was going to say rhythmic noises or the white rushing noises of water or things like that.
Yes, yes, like the surf or waterfall or any of those kinds of things. The scents, particularly kind of rich, the sense of incense or burning herbs can be associated with those kinds of things. So it's very sensory.
Mhm.
And historically, I mean, many of these techniques have been developed, cultivated, and really refined by, for example, the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox churches.
Ab-
They really know what they're doing. That architecture that leads your eyes to gaze way up, and statuary where you feel very small in relation to it,
mhm.
and the low light conditions and the incense and the Gregorian chanting going on. It's got those beautiful rhythmic trance inducing kind of qualities to it, all that stuff. And then Protestantism threw all that out, and I don't feel much when I go into a Protestant or say a Mormon church, but
Mhm.
I'm sure that people who follow those traditions do.
There's certainly been some experiences that I've had as a guest in some Protestant churches that it felt like yeah, wow, they're getting this ritual thing. Especially one that I think of is a Christmas Eve one that I went to several years where they turned the lights down and everyone had a candle and was holding the
Yeah.
candle up together and singing. I think it was like Silent Night that everyone was singing together, and some
Uh-huh.
of those real kind of iconic ones. So it's not as common with the Protestant groups as we see with the Catholics, but and I don't have any experience with Eastern Orthodox, a lot of experience with Catholics, so but but it's still done, right? I think it's something that
Hmm.
humans want to do, whatever our particular background is. We I think we seek that kind of experience out.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think to a certain extent we do that with sporting events as well. And I'm not a big sports person, but when I watch other people involved in that and in the rituals behind that, I go, "Oh wow, I recognize what you're doing.
Uh-huh.
This is familiar."
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. Yeah. What I think of this as being like is the creation of an emotional framework
Hmm.
that makes it possible for transformation to happen, right? because ritual is a transformative process.
Mhm.
We go into this trance state when the conditions are right, and then we do something that either feels like, recognizing the seasons and connecting with nature, or healing some wound that we've suffered previously, or aspiring towards, confidence and competence as we pursue some goal. All of those are the kinds of things that ritual can do for us. And of course, in the case of theism, there's just that worship thing, right?
Mhm.
Just getting into that state and then feeling very worshipful towards your god or gods, which we don't do. But my guess is that the feeling is very, very similar to what I feel about the cosmos and the earth.
Mm.
The same kind of humble, awe-inspired reverence, I
Yeah,
think.
that would be my guess as well. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about how to create this space.
hmm hmm there are a lot of different pieces that can go into this. I mean, we just threw out a whole bunch. There's actually a document, it's in my book as well, the Atheopaganism book, that describes many of the different attributes that can go into the creation of sacred space and a ritual.
Mhm.
But the primary ones to me, in terms of moving into that state, are a sense of safety and privacy.
Right.
You're not going to have people come barging in who aren't a part of the process. You're not going to be mocked or attacked
Mhm.
or any of that kind of thing. You feel a solidity in your place, which enables you to open yourself up and become emotionally vulnerable.
Which means that depending on your living situation, where you're creating this space may be very different, right?
hmm
If you live by yourself in a 3-bedroom apartment, maybe you have a whole room that you dedicate to this. Or you live with a whole bunch of other people. You live in a family situation or a dorm situation, and maybe it's something that you do privately in the bathroom because that's the only place that you can have a little bit of time and space
hmm
to yourself. And so how permanent or not the your setup for the space is going to be is going to depend on that kind of situation.
Right, right. And places in nature are also very good for this. You just have to make sure that they're secluded enough that you're not going to have people stumbling across you while you're doing your thing.
Right. And that you're
So,
safe with the other inhabitants of whatever that place is that you're in, right?
yes.
That you've checked around. There's no snakes hanging out that are right under the rock there, or
hmm
this isn't bear territory or something like that.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, the beach or the woods or the desert or, a mountaintop, all of those are wonderful places to do a ritual. And when we do that, it helps us to do a symbolic declaration of the space. The most common one in pagan spaces is the casting of the circle,
Hmm.
right? Where, there's actual movement. You go around the outside of the circle, some cases with a knife or a sword or a crystal or a
Hmm.
feather or something.
Right. Sometimes you literally sprinkle. People like to sprinkle like sands or salts or
Uh-huh.
things like that as well.
Right. To create the psychological impression of a barrier
Hmm.
that protects your privacy and safety. Yeah. So those are things that you can do to help to create that circumstance. I've had experiences, well, I had one experience of this ritual group. This was when I first got involved with paganism. It was probably like the second or third time I ever went to a ritual. And they were way out in the country, but they actually tried to do a ritual on land that wasn't theirs. And I didn't realize this until later.
Hmm.
And everybody was looking over their shoulders all the time, and there was no sacred space, there was no ritual state. It was terrible because there was not that sense of safety and privacy.
Hmm. So they were concerned that it was private land and that
Yes.
that somebody was going to come and ask them what are you doing here?
Yeah, shoo them away, or shoot at them, who knows.
Hmm.
But so don't do that. Use public land, or
Just out of
um
curiosity, was it like a really like special spot in terms of like
it
the
was a it was
like what?
kind of a rise of a grass covered hill that commanded an incredible view for 360 degrees. You could see for miles in
Okay,
all directions.
this is
So
curious. What would get somebody? What would inspire somebody to risk that?
yeah,
Must have been.
and how did the person that organized this discover it in the first place? I don't know.
Hmm,
But yeah, it was a weird experience, and it taught me a lesson that you can't do these things if you don't feel safe.
right. Yeah. And so I think that reminds us when we are organizing ritual to be
Mhm.
really mindful about that kind of thing and the different needs of the participants in the ritual. Right? Because you're talking about feeling safe in terms of, not knowing if you're going to get kicked off or not, but there's also other forms of safety.
Right.
There's the emotional safety that is just as important when it comes to our experiences and how how effective our ritual is going to be to how do we actually feel about this. So if I'm trying to do a ritual about self-healing or something like that and I think I'm going to get mocked, or I'm worried about being judged by the person next to me, it's probably not going to be as effective. I'm probably not going to be
Mhm.
able to get into that space.
Right. Or if you're non-binary and all the invocations are gender essentialist.
Right.
Right. I mean, there are a variety of kinds of inclusion that we need. There's multiple axes of inclusion that need to be addressed, as well as the kind of physical safety and emotional safety in relation to what's outside the circle. There's
Mhm.
also what's inside, right?
Yeah.
And we want to make sure that that is also facilitating of people feeling at ease and able to open themselves.
Right. Now, in most cases, though, it's probably going to be just you on your own, right?
Mhm.
Or in a small group. But I think that you can still kind of take that idea and think about it with yourself and how you might be feeling once you're in that space.
Right, right. And there are techniques that you can use to bring yourself into a state of radical presence. So you're not worried about the future, you're not thinking about things that are going on elsewhere, you're not, obsessing about something in the past. You're just very, very present in doing what's right before you.
Mhm.
And we were talking before we started to record, the use of the senses
Right.
can be very helpful in that.
Yeah. So using that as a framework, thinking about the classical senses of, all right, so what am I seeing? What am I hearing? What am I smelling? What am I feeling? Perhaps, maybe not in every case, but what am I tasting if
Mhm.
there's something involved with that, if you're drinking something or if there's a component that you're bringing in. And that's a really nice framework to use for setting up the space, either if it's a permanent space that you're setting up or if it's going to be a temporary moment, right? And just taking a moment to take those into account and then be a little bit more aware of them, that really just helps bring us to being really present in our bodies while we're doing the ritual.
Right, right. So let's say you're going to do a solo ritual and you go out in the woods and you find a place that's isolated enough that other people are not going to be coming out there, and you find a stump and you put a cloth over it and you build a focus, an altar, right, with symbols of the things that you want to do in this ritual.
Mm-hmm.
And it's aesthetically pleasing to you. You're looking at it. It's in the woods, which are beautiful. So there's this whole kind of drinking in with the eyes component. And you can hear the wind in the trees. Maybe you're near water, so you can hear some of that babbling brook sound as well. There's the smell of the warm pine needles or oak leaves or whatever they are. You can augment that by lighting maybe some frankincense, and that sweet kind of temple incense scent begins to transport you into a more intentional kind of focused space. One of the things that I've used in group rituals is either a single sip of wine or a single semi-sweet chocolate chip for a taste invocation. Sometimes in group rituals, they do what's called asperging, which is sprinkling with water, sometimes scented water. And what you usually do is you use a sprig of some kind of herb like rosemary to flick the water onto.
Dip it in, flick, dip, flick.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And that sensory feeling on the skin, as well as the scent that comes from it, also gives you that feeling of immediacy and being in your body and being right there present in the moment.
Right. And if you have the opportunity to taking your shoes off there and just feeling the forest floor between your toes, or leaning up against the tree and feeling the bark and the texture of that, and just noticing the wind on your skin, and maybe, tasting. We were talking about tasting with food, but you can taste the air too. Be
Yeah.
careful about tasting plants that you don't know.
Yeah, don't do
Right?
that.
Don't, but maybe if it was like a pine needle or something like that you're pretty confident about, you could get that intense taste there. But yeah, don't go eating or putting random plants in your mouth. The vast majority of them will not make you feel good. So
Right. So that is those sorts of techniques are the things that we use to create what we call sacred space. It's a very pleasurable state to be in. I find it to be very reverent and anticipatory in a way, like, there's a sense that something wonderful is about to happen. It just lends a richness to ritual practices that I just really treasure. So I would invite you to experiment with different ways of inducing that sense of sacred space. Personally, I like to live in a context that's very much not kind of the full-on implementation, but my room is decorated in a way that, when I light candles, it's this very kind of sort of place. And I just enjoy that. It helps me to feel more of a richness in my life. You may feel the same. You may want to do something similar, or you may have a little box that's your portable focus kit, and you take that to wherever you create sacred space and do your work there. And both of those are perfectly great.
right. And you don't need objects either. You can
No.
do all of it just with yourself, right? The tools are nice, but they're just that. They're just tools, right?
And you have tools built into your body. You have breath, right? I have seen and experienced creation of sacred space just with a deep inhale and then blowing it out like a bubble. Just and then there you are inside that bubble space, safe and protected and cared for. Protected. Yeah, I said that.
Yeah.
So, be aware of that. You don't have to have a lot of stuff. These techniques are really about working with our psychology, and our bodies are able to do that on their own.
Right. Well, I think this is a good place for us to wrap up for today, but we do have a couple of announcements. So
Yes.
your book is
My,
ready for pre-order, right?
it is my book, Round We Dance, Creating Meaning Through Seasonal Rituals, which will be released next April, is now available for pre-order on the Llewellyn website. We'll put a link in the show notes. And I'm really excited about it. And apparently they are too. They say they really love the book. So I'm psyched. It's kind of an outlier when you look at the Llewellyn page. It's full of all kinds of supernaturalist stuff, but they're publishing mine too, and I'm delighted. I'm just so excited to be working with them and having this book come out.
Yep.
So that's one thing.
And we had a Atheo-Pagan Society council meeting recently, and there will be a, what did you call it? A changing of the guard?
Yes.
So I have been the chair for 3 years at this point, and I'm going to be passing that on at this point. Still be on the council, but
Mhm.
going to step back from that chair position. So,
Right. And John Cleland Host has graciously agreed and been elected to take over that chair position. He was the vice chair
mhm,
for those first 3 years, so he's taken that over. Michael O'Halloran is our vice chair now,
mhm. Who's been on the
and
podcast several times,
yes, he
right?
has. And Rachel W. and C. Went are the other two officers, the treasurer and the secretary, respectively. And then
Right,
there's several others of us like me who are members of the council but are not officers.
right.
Uh,
But stay busy doing lots and lots of stuff.
yes,
We have a
yes.
lot of projects. There's lots of volunteering in different capacities and all of that. So,
It's so exciting. And every time somebody new comes on board as a volunteer, I'm reminded all over again, wow, what a great group of people. These are they're so fun to hang out with, and they're interesting, and the conversations are great, and they're just so kind of
just great
just
people.
good-hearted people. Yeah,
And we
yeah, for
always
sure.
talk ourselves into more work. Every time we get together, here's a new idea that we've got to do.
That's true.
Yep.
Well, since I am working now, I'm having to put some boundaries around that from what I've been doing before. But so far, everything seems to be working out okay. I'm doing a rework right now on the Atheo-Pagan hymnal, which is
hmm
downloadable from the blog site. I'm adding a bunch of sheet music in and a bunch of new chants and songs.
Oh, and the audiobook.
Oh, right.
I think that that would probably be of interest to our listeners.
In the last weeks before I started my new job, I realized that I wasn't going to have a big block of available open time anytime soon once I started the job. So I took a back burner project off the back burner, which was the recording of an audiobook of my first book, Atheo-Paganism: An Earth Honoring Path Rooted in Science. And I recorded the audiobook, and it is now purchasable from everywhere you get audiobooks except Audible, because Amazon.
All right. Well,
And
give me a
also
link and I'll put that
because,
in the show notes for people
great, great.
for your preferred location.
I should let you know the main reason that I didn't go with Audible as well is that they have extremely restrictive licensing requirements that give them exclusive right to distribute the audiobook for something like 3 years or something.
7.
Is it 7? Could
Um,
be.
yeah, unless they've changed it recently.
Well, I wouldn't imagine them changing it to improve it. So
Yeah.
yeah, anyway, it's
Well, that
I
might have been if you created it through their platform where you can hire a voice artist.
oh right, ACX.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that might be what I'm thinking of, but
yeah. But in any case, I wanted Chirp and Libro.fm and all those different outlets to be able to sell the book. So now you can go to any of those kinds of places and find it online.
well, that's great.
Yeah,
So,
it was a fun project to do. I had to lock myself in my room for several days and read the thing into a microphone, but now it's there.
yep. Well, and that'd be great to have it in your voice too. I always really appreciate when the audiobooks are read by the author because you
Yeah,
really get the meaning a little bit more just in the way that they say the sentences.
I agree. And in this case, the whole story about how I came to atheopaganism is all in the first person.
Hmm.
So it really wouldn't make any sense to have some other narrator.
Hmm.
It really kind of had to be me. So anyway, it's in the can, it's up on the web, it's available now. So if you have a commute and want to read the book but don't have time, or while you're working, whatever, that's a resource that's now available to you.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Yucca. Always wonderful to talk with you, and we'll see you next week.